Panic in Crimea, a powerful Ukrainian drone attack on Sevastopol. Footage has appeared online showing the new Ukrainian missile that Putin fears so much. Hungary is once again without oil. The Druzhba pipeline is almost destroyed. 73% of Ukrainians believe in victory in this war, and a Trump ally has suggested admitting Russia into NATO. Lukashenko is threatening Ukraine with a nuclear bombardment from Belarus. And Putin, fearing the loss of power, is intensifying repression in Russia. And finally, a shocking sensation. A teacher organized an orgy with 11th grade students. Hello, my name is Karina Klishan. Right now, the main news. But first, please like this video and subscribe to our channel so we don't lose touch with you on YouTube. While the whole world is trying to negotiate with Putin at the front, the dictator is only increasing the bloodshed. Just in the past 24 hours, there have been at least 157 combat clashes with the enemy at the front. The fiercest fighting right now is in the Pokrovsk direction. The Ukrainian armed forces repelled 43 assaults there. Russia is not slowing down and is trying to capture the entire Donetsk region. But our forces are fighting back so effectively that the Russians are suffering enormous losses. In just the past 24 hours, they have lost 790 soldiers killed and wounded, 4 tanks, 3 armored vehicles, 46 artillery systems, multiple rocket launchers, and 1 air defense system. However, as stated by Kovalenko, the head of the Center for Countering Disinformation, in some areas the Russians are retreating.
The defense forces are operating very successfully in several sectors of the front. In some areas, the Russians are retreating.
But Donbass is a sore spot for them, which is why a breakthrough by the occupiers was recorded in the village of Dobropilya. The Ukrainian armed forces have already stopped the breakthrough and taken the Russians prisoner. However, eyewitnesses told Waday's media exactly how the Russians entered the village. The atrocities committed by the Russians know no bounds.
When the Ukrainian soldiers entered the previously captured villages, they literally found seas of blood. Upon entering the village, the Russians carried out a real massacre among the civilian population. Yes, not among the military, but among peaceful residents. They slaughtered everyone who came into sight. Firearms were used only to immobilize those who were still alive. The subsequent injuries were inflicted specifically with bladed weapons. But it wasn't just civilians who were killed. Dismembered corpses of domestic and farm animals were also found at the scene, including cats, dogs, cows, goats, and so on.
Just to help you understand the difference between Ukrainian and Russian soldiers, I'll show you the following video. A Ukrainian soldier, during the capture of a Russian on the front line, gave him a cigarette, thus showing humanity. Meanwhile, the Ukrainian Navy successfully located and completely destroyed a significant Russian 4-post unmanned aerial vehicle UAV base, which was strategically located at the Khersonis airfield within the historically significant and currently temporarily occupied city of Sevastopol, a crucial port city on the Crimean Peninsula. 5 UAVs used by the enemy to monitor the situation in the Black Sea were destroyed. That's up to $27 million. Putin can only be stopped by force. He understands nothing else. Our soldiers are fighting heroically despite the enemy's numerical superiority. Write words of support for the Ukrainian defenders in the comments. I know for sure they're watching us. And Ukraine finds the strength to fight the enemy every single day. Ukraine recently unveiled a new cruise missile called Flamingo. And it's already known that production has reached 1 missile per day. As stated by Fabian Hoffman, a missile technology expert at the University of Oslo, 3,000 to 5,000 of these Flamingo missiles in 24 or 48 hours could destroy more than 25% of Russia's economic output. Here is footage of strikes on Russian oil refineries. But it's not just about the Flamingo. The Ukrainian company Firepoint has set up mass production of the new long-range drone FP1. It was publicly unveiled only in May 2025. Every day, the company produces about 100 of these drones, which amounts to around 3,000 drones per month. In this way, Ukraine has caught up with Russia in the production of strike drones. Ukrainians know how to hit Putin's pressure points. There is already a noticeable fuel shortage in Russia due to attacks on oil refineries. Meanwhile, in Hungary, they hadn't yet managed to restore the oil supply through the Russian Druzhba pipeline after the attack. So the supply was interrupted again. Ukrainian drones once again damaged the oil pipeline, specifically the pumping station. Deliveries have already been halted for the third time this month. Now, the foreign ministries of Hungary and Slovakia are asking the European Commission to put pressure on Ukraine to stop the strikes on the pipeline. As the Hungarian Prime Minister stated, Trump told Orbán that he is very angry about Ukraine's strikes on the Druzhba pipeline. "I don't like hearing this. I'm very angry. Tell this to Slovakia, you're my great friend," wrote the US President to the Hungarian Prime Minister. Even after the first strike by Ukrainian drones, the Hungarian Prime Minister started complaining to Trump. And all because friendship with a dictatorship should cost everyone dearly. It's time for Hungary to think about this. I know that many of you are watching us from outside Ukraine. Write in the comments which country you're watching us from and whether many of your fellow citizens support Ukraine. Every evening I set aside time to read your comments. Sometimes they're really interesting. Meanwhile, the mood among Ukrainians themselves is truly encouraging. The Democratic Initiatives Foundation conducted a survey among Ukrainians, and 3/4 of Ukrainian citizens, that's 73%, believe in victory. For most Ukrainians, the signs of victory are the return of all prisoners, deported and abducted people, the preservation of statehood, and the cessation of massive enemy shelling. And for 27% of people, victory means the restoration of Ukraine's 1991 borders. Give this video a like if you, like me, also believe in Ukraine's victory. One of Russia's demands, though it's more of an ultimatum, is that Ukraine renounce joining NATO. Trump, whether unconsciously or perhaps even consciously, plays along with Russia's wishes because he does not support Ukraine joining the North Atlantic Alliance. Why am I bringing this up? Ukraine and NATO is one of the top topics for discussion worldwide. But Trump's ally Matt Gaetz suggests shifting the focus to Russia and says that NATO should admit Russia.
A brilliant plan, unmatched and reliable, like a Swiss watch.
Gaetz calls his ingenious idea one of the most effective ways to achieve lasting peace.
I have an idea. Offer Russia membership in NATO. Of course, for this slow dance, Trump should have gotten everything he wanted from Putin regarding a ceasefire, economic cooperation, and territorial disputes.
I can't find any polite words to describe this. But don't hold back in the comments. But the Russians themselves are definitely not ready for NATO. A new money-making scheme in the Russian army. They shoot at each other by agreement, then receive millions in compensation and injury benefits. And this is all about the soldiers of the so-called elite 83rd Air Assault Brigade. The price tag, by the most conservative estimates, is 200 million rubles. So what's going on in the non-elite units then? We'll tell you more about this next. Making money from self-inflicted wounds. The Russian Investigative Committee has uncovered a large-scale scam in the 83rd Separate Guards Air Assault Brigade. It turned out that the much-vaunted Russian paratroopers were shooting each other for the sake of extra leave payments and even state awards. The investigation has already identified the names of 35 servicemen who took part in this military charade, which cost the budget about 200 million rubles. One of the brigade's assault troops gave up the scheme. The first to come under investigation was the head of the Special Operations Group of the 83rd Brigade, Konstantin Frolov, known by the call sign Executioner.
For me, since childhood, duty and honor were never just empty words. I always wanted to be a soldier, and I became one.
Konstantin Frolov, the son of a former deputy head of Roscosmos. Ironically, Russian propaganda spared no effort in making him a hero of the so-called special military operation. Videos featuring the head of the Special Operations Group were circulated by both pro-military channels and the Kremlin's mouthpiece, Channel 1.
The enemy knows him by the call sign Executioner. To his own, he is the commander, the old man, the brother, the senior of the sniper group in one of the airborne units. He just returned from Avdiivka, where he was wounded for the 7th time. A fragment flew under his body armor and nearly reached his heart. He refused rehabilitation and leave and returned to duty. He says that's what his officer's honor demands of him.
In reality, it turned out that even Baron Munchausen himself would envy Frolov's tall tales. Everything the journalists poured into the viewers' ears was a lie.
The documents regarding the extension of Lieutenant Colonel Frolov's arrest state that during his service in the Special Military Operations Zone, he sustained 4 injuries. The defendant himself wears insignia, indicating 5 minor and 2 serious wounds. However, thanks to testimonies and expert examinations, it was established that the injuries were not sustained in combat conditions. Later, the serviceman himself admitted that, at his own request, his fellow soldiers shot at him, aiming so as not to hit any vital organs. All of this was done in order to receive payments amounting to 3 million rubles. The awards, as the investigation now believes, were presented to Konstantin Frolov illegally.
Amusingly, when investigators started to unravel the story, it turned out that the heroic deeds Frolov so generously shared with grateful propagandists were nothing but banal lies. For example, the 4th daughter, the adopted one supposedly saved by Frolov and so vividly described by the correspondent in the TV report, does not actually exist.
We were on a mission there, we got hit, and a house nearby was hit too. A girl was badly wounded there. I picked her up and carried her. And then she said to me, "Uncle Savior, you're bleeding." I looked and saw I was covered in blood. And when I brought her to the medics, I immediately passed out.
During the investigation, Konstantin Frolov gave up another accomplice, Guards Colonel Artem Gorodilov, commander of the 83rd Brigade. By the way, he was promoted after commanding one of the units in Bucha at the start of the Russian invasion.
The main things are, well, willpower, courage, and character. Honor is more valuable than life.
Gorodilov is also accused of large-scale fraud. It turned out that in his position, he also put his ingenuity to use. He quickly figured out how to get rich and eagerly helped self-inflicted wound cases receive payouts and awards. Artem Gorodilov also gave up his accomplices and confessed to his guilt. The defendants in the case tried to return to the so-called Special Military Operations Zone instead of staying behind bars, but so far without success. In the near future, the Lugansk Garrison Military Court will consider the case on its merits and deliver a verdict. From
Every voice matters. Join our community, support independent journalism and help us bring you the truth from Ukraine. Become a member of Ukraine today. Join us now.
I'll end the war in 24 hours to figure it out yourselves. It turns out Trump's momentum isn't that great. Amid the difficulties in organizing a meeting between Zelensky and Putin, the US president, so to speak, is washing his hands of peace negotiations between Ukraine and Russia. He's basically saying let them organize everything themselves. The Guardian reports on this decision by Trump. Well, the fact that Trump's enthusiasm has faded is not surprising, considering that Russia is still turning up its nose at negotiations with Ukraine at the leadership level, which are supposed to form the basis for a peaceful settlement. It's no coincidence that he writes that Putin is not ready to meet with Zelensky and never will be.
If this meeting does take place, as Arina Lutsevich, director of the Russia and Eurasia program at Chatham House, put it, Putin will have to come to terms with the failure of a meeting with a president whom he considers a laughingstock from a non-existent country. Moreover, according to her, it would mean a serious shift in tone that would be difficult to explain to the Russian people. Putin has brainwashed Russians so thoroughly on state television, saying that Zelensky is a Nazi, that Ukraine is a puppet state of the West, that Zelensky is illegitimate. So why is he suddenly talking to him?
At the same time, Trump himself keeps talking about somehow ending the war in 2 weeks. Again.
In 2 weeks, the situation regarding the resolution of the war in Ukraine should become clearer, and perhaps after that, we will have to change our tactics.
Will Trump change his tactics? We'll see. Hazelnuts aren't enough. We also need to equip our own missiles with nuclear warheads. Belarus, following Russia's example, has started playing with nukes.
We've started a good tradition here.
Of course, we're not talking about modernization on the level of Russia, but Lukashenko wants to equip his Polonese missile systems with nuclear warheads.
Today, this is a modern system. The missile range used to be 200 kilometers. Now, these are missiles with a range of 300 kilometers. This is a high-precision weapon. Of course, any weapon requires adjustments and modifications. Questions are already being raised about equipping these missiles with nuclear warheads. Placing nuclear warheads on the Polonaise would give the Belarusian military control over these nuclear missiles, and that would be a violation of international agreements.
Why is this important? Lukashenko has already threatened Ukraine with these Polonaise systems, deploying them near our border. Now we might be talking about nuclear scare tactics and, of course, not without the Kremlin's involvement. After the promise of Iskanders, Putin might also transfer nuclear warheads for these mobile systems to Belarus in order to intimidate Ukraine, Poland, and the Baltic states. In short, it looks like there will be another old man with a nuclear button. although it's obvious that every move involving nuclear weapons in Belarus will be controlled by the Kremlin. Interestingly, yesterday Lukashenko claimed that Putin was offered the chance to strike the Ukrainian president's office with an Iskander, but out of the kindness of his heart, Putin refused, saying, "Absolutely not." Such magnanimity. The whitewashing of the dictator continues. 400 Russians have been put on trial for criticizing and mocking the Kremlin dictator, and that's over 6.5 years. Out of all 140 million people in Russia, only 400 brave souls were found. We will tell you about these people and what made Putin's repressive system lash out at them.
Repression and punishment for disrespecting the Russian dictator. According to calculations by Russian opposition media, in recent years, hundreds of Russians have been punished in the Russian Federation for offending Putin. Insulting the public morals of the president, how Russians are punished for disrespecting Putin. In the past 6.5 years, nearly 400 people have been prosecuted for criticizing and mocking the president. To persecute Russians for insulting the Radiant Sun, a sarcastic nickname for Putin, law enforcement uses the administrative article on petty hooliganism. You can be fined or arrested for any little thing. Words like butler, criminal, or a portrait of the bunker dweller with a mourning ribbon are enough grounds for hefty fines, starting at 30 and going up to 100,000 rubles, or even for being arrested for 14 days.
This is a totalitarian regime. This is, in essence, a repeat of the cult of personality, the cult of Stalin, whom Putin models himself after. And you know, the entire architecture, the whole power vertical that Putin has built, and that's why the regime is called Putin's, is designed to glorify him, Putin.
Since the start of the full-scale war, the number of cases for insulting Putin has increased several times over. According to Verstka's calculations, Russians have paid at least 11,556,000 rubles in total. Hundreds of law enforcement officers and government officials are working to protect the image of the bunker czar.
The thing is, he doesn't even read social networks, so he actually won't even see any of this unless someone prints it out and brings it to him in a folder. The real question is different. The law enforcement agencies themselves, the state apparatus and the army, all these institutions, are interested in making sure that this doesn't happen, that there is no insult or diminishing of Putin's role in society.
At the same time, anything at all can be considered an insult. Law enforcement punishes not only for evaluating the personal qualities of Butler, but also for criticizing the dictator's policies or comparing him to war criminals. For example, the popular Russian performer and leader of the rock band DDT, Yuri Shevchuk, was fined 50,000 rubles under an administrative article for discrediting the Russian army.
Motherland, my friends, is not the president's ass that you have to constantly fuss over and kiss. Motherland is a poor old woman at the train station selling potatoes. That's what the motherland is.
Equally important is that Russian law enforcement is gladly assisted by Russian informers and Putin supporters. So, in one Russian school, a teacher threatens students with execution for writing "Putin is a thief" on the blackboard. Our president, whom Class 10A gravely insulted yesterday, a crime that would have been punishable by execution in Soviet times. I have spoken with the teachers, with everyone, regarding your class, and I insist on a meeting with your parents. 400 lawsuits for insulting Putin do not reflect the real picture. After all, the system only imposes fines for relatively harmless behavior and statements. For those who truly hurt the pride of the Kremlin psychopath, the death penalty without trial or investigation is prepared. Litvinenko, Politkovskaya, Nemtsov, Navalny.
Vladimir Putin would have voted for Yanukovych. He is a f***ing Vladimir Putin, just so you understand.
Extracurricular education has reached a new level. In Israel, a teacher organized an orgy with her students.
They had oral sex.
Local media report that a 43-year-old English teacher named Esther invited 3 11th grade students over for tea. Whether there was actually tea, we don't know, but she had sex with 2 of the teenagers while the third watched. This teacher of the year had been in intimate relationships with her students from September 2024 to January.
The teacher explicitly stated in court that she had engaged in sexual relations with the students primarily because her husband was away on military duty, and she consequently felt profoundly lonely and in a significant state of emotional crisis. One of the involved students said that the incident was well known at the school and that everyone was talking about it. She flirted with us. We smoked with her during breaks. We felt like she was our friend. I don't know a single student our age who would refuse to have sex with a teacher who looks like her and who was the one initiating these relationships, the young man said.
When the police found out about everything, the teacher confessed to it all. She was fired from her job and permanently banned from working in the education system, as well as prohibited from any activity involving children and teenagers for 8 years. But when it came to punishment, she got off lightly, because Israeli human rights activists called for the case to be reclassified as rape. And what do you think about this kind of educational process? Leave your comments. Give this video a like to support what we do. And be sure to subscribe to our channel Ukraine Today so you don't miss future episodes. See you next time.